Hello everybody, Gannon here. Welcome back to another one of my Star Trek reviews. In last week's episode of Star Trek Picard, we found Picard and the gang in a very dangerous situation at the end of the episode. Riker finally gave into Picard's demands on firing wholeheartedly back at the Shrike, but a little bit too late, as when they fired off their photon torpedoes and their phasers, they were then redirected via the use of the prototype portal gun weapon that very much reminds me of Valve's Portal 2, where we were left off at the end of the episode with about 3 photon torpedoes going into the back of the new Neo-Constitution class Titan, with Captain Riker leaving Picard with a very harsh remark, saying that he had killed, quote, them all, like literally everybody on the ship, putting that all on Picard's shoulders. And we have the huge bombshell in last week's episode that the changelings are back. Very popular Star Trek race that was introduced and primarily seen in Deep Space Nine. The changelings are back. What changeling faction? We don't know. Everybody is trying to guess. It could be a completely new one. But in this week's episode, we are going to talk about how Picard, Riker, his new son Jack, and Beverly, and the rest of the Titan crew, especially Captain Shaw, because in my opinion, this show should literally be called Star Trek Shaw at this point, because this dude is amazing. I love Captain Shaw. Surprisingly, my favorite character out of the season, and my favorite character in today's episode. With all that being said, let's get right into it. Are going to be reviewing Star Trek Picard Season 3, the final season, Episode 4, this one titled A No-Win Scenario, because as a result of last week's episode with their conflict with the Shrike, everybody on board is now caught in this gravity well that seemingly is sucking away energy with every little thing that they do to try to combat it. And at the start of the episode, it really seems clear, even to Riker, to Picard, and every experienced crew member on board, that this is a no-win scenario and that they're probably going to die either just by the ship exploding in the gravity well or by suffocation via loss of the life support system. This episode is insane, but something real quick I'd like to share with you guys before I go any further. This right here is my first Space Marine of March. This is my actual, first battle brother that I've ever assembled. I'm building an Ultramarines army, 40k, and we're marching for McCrag during March. Play the Ultramarines, and we assemble our army so that we may march for the 13th Primarch, Robute Gilliman! March from McCrag! He's so dope. Probably not, just dropped him. Probably not focused in, but it's totally fine. Episode 4 was just sensational for so many reasons. After I got done watching this episode, I truly felt for the first time, after about 8 seasons of New Trek, after so many attempts at Star Trek trying to deliver itself in this new drama short format where we still get 15-minute episodes on average, but at the same time, we're working on this budget, everything's really flashy, it's really presented in more so of a drama. Star Trek Discovery was a drama. The first 2 seasons kind of failed at it, where there was some really strong points that I enjoyed, and there have been things that they've added into the Star Trek universe that I've really enjoyed. They've really dropped the ball here and there for the first 2 seasons of Picard, but Season 3, Episodes 1 through 4, we've just gone straight to Episode 4, and I just have no complaints. Everything that happens is just a smooth chain of events that I love. In this episode, we have a lot of things answered. We just have a lot of great scenes. For instance, Captain Shaw, I just can't get enough of this guy. He's not injured anymore, but he's walking around with a cane. He's definitely letting some steam loose. In the middle of the episode, when all seems lost, Picard takes it upon himself to spend the last final moments he believes he has getting to know his long-lost son Jack, and he gets the idea to do this from Riker. We actually learn that the reason Riker's acting So I guess mildly, he's not very confident. He doesn't really seem like his usual Captain Riker self that I imagine he was in previous years. We actually got an explanation for that in this episode. I really thought, even till like the final moments of this episode, that Riker could perhaps be a changeling, and that the Riker that we truly know and loved is locked up in a room somewhere. We actually learn in this episode that Riker's behavior is a result of him having a newfound healthy fear of death. He makes a comment about how when he buried his, I believe, like, unborn son, I don't know if Thaddeus, like, died as, like, an unborn child or if he just died really young, I don't remember. But after he was forced to bury his son, he gained a really nihilistic view of the universe, and he started to believe that there is truly nothing after death. There is no existence or life after death. So he's just been a little bit nihilistic, has been not himself recently, and as an attempt to protect Kestra and his wife Deanna, he is now just running away from them and keeping this new version of himself just away from home. He thought that that was going to be the solution. He shares in this episode that, you know, he found out that that is definitely not the solution, and Riker continues to act very off, very scared, and very not confident, not willing to do the right thing. All of his friends are suggesting maybe the only way to escape, and he still struggles to come to the conclusion that he just needs to trust his friends like he's been doing for decades now. So many great scenes in the bar. For one thing, we have like 3 flashback scenes of Picard basically in the new 10 forward, of a lot of new cadets and a lot of just younger Starfleet members coming up to him while he's trying to eat a meal and asking him questions about his life. One thing that was kind of interesting is that they brought up how he actually had got in a confrontation with a Hirogen Alpha, and that just was interesting to me because that means that essentially Picard on a later version of the Enterprise was able to travel to the Delta Quadrant and have adventures there similar to Janeway, because the Hirogen are definitely a Delta Quadrant species, and it's either that or a Hirogen from the Delta Quadrant learned of the famous Jean-Luc Picard and wanted to capture him as a prize, traveled like all the way to the Alpha Quadrant to try to kill Picard. I thought that was really interesting, and as much as these scenes were just kind of admirable and just kind of a little bit cute to see, honestly, you know, Picard in his old age being admired by these young cadets, you really get to see why they included this and peppered it in throughout the episode. While they're in the bar, 2 things happen. One, Picard basically admitting to Jack that this meeting and this time taken with him is not so much for Jack as it is for Picard. He's willing to just sit there and admit that he needed that. In his final moments where he perceives that he's about to die, he wanted to spend that time getting to know Jack. I felt like that meant a lot to Jack, even though Jack was basically explaining to Picard, hey, you don't really need to do this for my sake. I've been alone my whole life. I've gotten quite used to it. You don't really need to have this ooey gooey final moment with me. Picard then says, no bro, this is kind of for me. And then this is just kind of tear jerking. Oh my god. There's a couple parts of this episode that make you want to cry. Second, we learn why, you know, as much as I love Captain Shaw, a constant criticism I make of him is that he made that really unclassy Borg comment to Picard in episode 1, and we learn a great explanation for why he does that is because he used to be just essentially like a grease monkey, a part of an engineering team on a ship called the U.S.S. Constance, I believe it was called, that was one of the ships at Wolf 359, trauma dumping in front of even members of his crew in the bar. This is an amazing scene from Captain Shaw. This actor, I don't recall him doing any other roles besides this, but oh my god, do I love the new captain of the Titan. I love this dude. This is Star Trek Shaw. Through Star Trek Picard, Captain Shaw is a baller character after he recounts this crushing story about how he was one of the 10 people to just arbitrarily get selected to survive the destruction of the U.S.S. Constance, and that's why he holds this grudge against Picard. He delivers this amazing monologue about how Picard was at the head of the Borg cube, setting space on fire. And it was just a really powerful scene, makes you love Captain Shaw even more. And after the fact, Picard leaves and he looks towards his crew and he apologizes essentially for his behavior about how he's been kind of an asshole. Really, Captain Shaw is amazing because this dude is clearly influencing people around him. Captain Shaw's potty mouth is getting to Picard in the worst, in amazing ways possible, and the more critical Star Trek fans are going to absolutely go wild at two things in this episode. For one thing, there was a weed joke in this episode between Captain Shaw and 7 of 9, where Captain Shaw suggests that to find the changeling on board the ship, that 7 of 9 needs to go and find the goo bin, or the pot that he lives in, and 7 of 9 is like, I assume you're not talking about cannabis. Which is just, like, really corny for so many reasons. I really doubt that cannabis is got to even be worth conversation in the 24th century. There's got to be such cooler recreational drugs out there from the 100+ planets in the Federation that cannabis shouldn't even be coming up in conversation. It's just kind of a sign of the times. It's a little bit corny. It doesn't really bother me, but I know it's going to bother somebody. And number 2, Picard just straight up swore so badly in this episode. He said the F word, recalling a story of him and Jack Crusher. And this is just old Picard not giving a damn, essentially. I love it. I love how we're finally swearing in Star Trek. I love how this finally feels like a true, successful Star Trek drama. Season 3 of Star Trek Picard is so amazing. It is almost a crime about how I had to wait 2 seasons to really, truly feel this impressed. This is a little bit of spoilers if you haven't actually seen the episode, but there was this crazy scene where Vadic, the captain of the Shrike, cut off her changeling hand. The changeling goop went over to this kind of apparatus, flew up, and almost like it was a villain in a video game, or like the Akatsuki from Naruto, they used this apparatus in the goo to almost create some kind of subspace link, so that caricature or a person actually showed up in the goo and gave Vadic orders to relentlessly pursue Jack and the Titan into the nebula, even if it meant just throwing away the portal gun for us to never see in Star Trek again, unfortunately. I don't know if we're ever going to see the portal gun again, because it was just thrown off into space. I would like to see that mentioned at least one more time. There was actually 2 scenes, I think, that were just absolutely sensational. For one thing, when Captain Shaw was repairing the ship for them to actually make their daring escape from the nebula, him and 7 of 9 actually capturing the changeling and deciphering who it was. I thought it was going to be way harder than that. In all honesty, guys, changelings are overpowered. You need to have like a scanner in every room, and you need to have high-powered phaser rifles in order to exterminate them. I was kind of surprised that 7 of 9 was able to kill it in one shot. I thought it was going to get back up and do something. I was really afraid. The phasers and the phaser pistols in the current time setting must be absolutely juicer to take out a changeling in one shot. Then number 2, oh my gosh, I went crazy when it all went full circle. And remember how I talked about those scenes about Picard talking to the cadets? After about 2 or 3 flashbacks, Picard finally got fed up with the cadets and was like, okay, I need to eat my fish, guys. I really can't answer any more questions. And then finally, somebody in the background asked him a question about families, like, other than these adventures, is there anything that you ever, wanted more? Did you ever want to have a family? Was there ever anything more to this life? And then only at the end of this episode, only after Picard escape the nebula by the skin of their teeth, escape Vadic by Riker finally finding himself again and finally seeming like the fearless commander like we used to know. He did this amazing technique and maneuver where he captured a meteorite with the tractor beam and slingshotted it at the Shrike in order to defeat Vadic, for them to actually get a clean getaway and for them to have a happy ending. I really thought that Vadic was actually going to come at them again and things were going to get even worse after they escaped the nebula. But no, not with Riker at the helm. After all that, man, Picard realizes that the person who asked that question 5 years ago was actually Jack, seeking him out, trying to see what kind of person he was, trying to see if he actually did care to have a family. Picard said the words that the cadets in the room wanted to hear, but definitely not the words that Jack wanted to hear. And you could just tell by the look on his face that Picard, after saying it, after he said the claim, Starfleet was the only family that he needed, that just Jack was crushed. And Picard just sat there for a second and then he realized that he didn't even believe what he said himself. You have that third reaction, which is just like the two Picards from the present and 5 years ago merging together, coming to the realization that that was Jack, and he had actually met his son 5 years prior to this whole debacle. Oh my god, finally a good Star Trek drama. That is a good Star Trek drama. Finally, one of the great captains of Star Trek actually has a son, actually has like a child that we might get to see grow up, actually might get to see become a permanent character. We've been absolutely trolled multiple times. I mean, we have Captain Sisko with Jake, but Jake's always been around. I'm more so talking about Captain Picard existing for a whole series and then Jason Vigo popping up. Or, you know, Captain Kirk existing for so long, and then in the second and third TOS movies, we find out that he has a son named David who is just kind of immediately retconned and murdered. But we finally have this awesome son in the form of Jack, and there's just a lot of great scenes that we get from him. I really like him. I really like basically all the aspects of this new show, but Captain Shaw is my favorite. I think second behind Captain Shaw is this new Worf. I'm absolutely loving Worf. He is like the version of Worf that I would love to see in his old age. I really can't make any other criticisms about it, but I love Captain Shaw. I loved that scene of him breaking down and criticizing Picard and calling him Locutus. Amazing episode. This one is easily getting an 8 out of 10 for me, maybe even 8.5 out of 10. Thoroughly entertaining all the way through. Love all the characters even more after this one, especially Geordi LaForge's cute helmsman daughter. She is so fine. Somebody informed me that that is not actually LeVar Burton's daughter, and that's actually just an actress, but Geordi LaForge has another daughter that we are waiting to see pop up later in the season. I can't even begin to guess what's going on with Jack. He's having a total attack at the end of the episode, having visions in the mirror, and he's obviously got some prior connection to Vadik in this organization that he's not letting on, or maybe he just doesn't know and it's kind of like a repressed memory. Either way, there's something crazy going on with him. I hope that it doesn't lead to his eventual demise. If Jack dies, or if one of the TNG crew members dies, I'm gonna be honest, Star Trek Picard's just a little bit too stupidly grimdark for me at that point. We had Data's death in Season 1, which in a lot of ways is really cool. Season 2 was great. Killing Q off was a questionable thing that they did. How necessary it is to basically kill off an omniscient energy being like that, I don't know. The only thing that's really good about that is that it proves no matter how powerful a being may seem, that all things die, but it's just a little bit corny that Q died. I don't know. It's not something that I necessarily hate. It's not something that I necessarily love. I'm just waiting to see if Terry and the gang provide us with some horrible-ass death. Riker at the end talking to Deanna after having that near-death experience and after finding himself again and after finding the courage in his heart to just call her up and basically say that he admits that there's been stuff going on with him, found his love for just basically being alive and finding beauty in the universe again, and that is super dope. What a great episode. What a great drama. I'm loving it. 8.5 out of 10. Thank you guys so much for watching another one of my Star Trek reviews. The last two reviews did really well. Much appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody watching them, and especially everybody leaving comments. They're my favorite thing about YouTube. The more comments you guys leave, the happier it makes me. Very thankful for the engagement on the last two videos. With all that being said, if you're enjoying any of the content that you see on the channel, very flattered if you were to subscribe. This is a channel where I basically talk about things that I like. I do activities that I like, primarily science fiction, and I try to have a little bit of fun while doing that. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and with all that being said, hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Live long and prosper until next week's episode.